Evan Brand, great to see you again, dude.
Luke, how's it going?
It's going great, man. I hear your voice on your show more and on sometimes on YouTube more than I actually talk to you. So we text sometimes, but it's good to see your mug again, dude.
I know, you too. You got some good color, man. You've been getting out in nature, I suppose.
You know what? I actually have. I've been getting out in the sun a lot. In fact, I had my windows open a few minutes ago in the studio here, which is like my office. And I was like, oh, it's Monday. You know, it's the day before 4th of July. It'll probably be quiet enough. And then my neighbor, like the building right next to me, he's got this crazy like sneeze where he does 3 in a row, but it's like it's super super loud. It irritates the shit out of me. And then he started doing that and I was like, oh man, I had to shut all the daylight out, so now I'm in like this wacky artificial light in here. But
You're
yes,
gonna have to give him some herbal antihistamines.
yeah, I know, dude. Maybe we can talk about that. So yeah, but I do. You know what I've been doing a lot, because I just interviewed Jack Cruz again, because I know you've interviewed him a lot, and now I'm all freaked out about lighting again. We talked for 2.5 hours. It was all about how my computer light and the LED lights in the environment are killing me. I was like, oh my god. So yes.
Well, so if you've got Iris on your computer,
Let's
which is
talk
far
about
superior
Iris.
to Lux,
Let's talk
to
about
Flux.
let's talk about Flux and Iris. Let's just jump right in there.
Yeah.
And why,
So
first of all, give the listeners some background. Those people that haven't heard my other shows on this, like, what's the problem with staring at your devices? Why do we not want to do that? Just freestyle.
Sure. Well, we evolved to wake up to the sun, which is going to set the circadian rhythm. You've got this whole HPA axis that a lot of functional medicine people like myself chat about. So you've got the hypothalamus that talks to the pituitary, which talks to the adrenals. Everyone talks about adrenal issues, but many people don't talk about the influence of light on adrenal health. And so people talk about adaptogenic herbs, which have become very popular, medicinal mushrooms, great. However, many people are ignoring the fact that we're supposed to wake up with sunlight and go to bed after the sun goes down. Or if we mock our ancestors, if we don't go to bed after the sun goes down, at least all we're exposed to would have been fire, which is going to be a pretty low light in terms of intensity, but also low on the spectrum in terms of your Kelvin. I'd say fire is probably maybe 13 or 1500 Kelvin if you were kind of looking at a chart. And our iPhones.
And Kelvin is the temperature of the light from like warm to cool light. Is that right?
Exactly. So if you see those really bright LED lights that a lot of new vehicles have, your Beamers, your Teslas, your Lexuses, those are typically like 6,000 Kelvin, which is almost a pure white, maybe even a hint of blue towards it. And that's why they're pretty tough to look at night. Plus they're projectors, so the bulbs are much more intense than your old halogen style bulbs. But in the evenings, when you watch the sunset and you see the sky turn red and orange and pink, you're not really witnessing the sky turn that color. You are, but in a way, you're watching the removal of blue is what you're really witnessing. And when you remove blue from this full spectrum, which is full spectrum lighting, which is the sun, when you remove blue, you've got all the other spectrums left. When that happens, you've got the optic nerve. It's got something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in it, or the SCN.
I love that word.
I know, isn't it great?
Yeah.
So that picks up this light, and then it sends the signal, hey, the day's over. Let's start producing melatonin. The problem is, like I mentioned about cortisol, it's a light-driven hormone. And so when you've got smartphones, you've got tablets, you've got LED lights of any kind from your routers, your tablets, your DVRs, etc., even just a small light behind a man's kneecap was enough to suppress melatonin. And so we know that this light at night, even Nightshift on iPhone's not going to cut it because it doesn't remove all the blue. Nightshift is a good start. I'm proud of Apple. I'm proud of the mainstream for heading that direction, but it's not enough. They're still blue. If you chat with Dr. Mercola, he'll tell you that he's tested that with I can't remember the fancy name, but it's basically a spectrometer where you can measure the frequencies and the color temperatures of light. He says that it's better. But just like with F.Lux, which a lot of people have on their computer, there's still massive spikes in the blue range. That stimulates cortisol.
Okay, that's what I'm using now. I looked into the Iris thing, and we're going to cover it. So here's what I'm doing is I use Nightshift, and it's just always on Nightshift, even in the daytime.
Perfect.
My Instagram probably looks weird on other phones because I probably like make filters that don't account for that. But I also have the screen. Like I think I have the bulletproof ZenTech screen also on my iPhone just for safekeeping. What do you think about that as a strategy for your phone?
I think it's decent. I like Dave. I don't know if that product or any product that's designed to block blue like that actually works. You'd have to test it ultimately as opposed to take my opinion. You'd have to test that
Right.
filter and see if it does anything. I'm highly skeptical that it does anything. Um, I'm also concerned about the amount of people that are wearing blue blocking glasses all day, because that's just completely retarded, because you're totally disrupting your circadian rhythm. I've looked at people's adrenal salivary profiles, so their adrenal stress test, and people are screwing themselves. They're screwing themselves up very badly. They've got incredibly low free cortisol because they're wearing blue blockers all day. They're never getting the signal to the brain that it's daytime. So they never have what's called the cortisol awakening response, which is in the first hour of the day when you're supposed to peak. They're never having a peak. So it's like you're waking up with your iPhone charged at 7%. You never plug it in, and then you're hoping to make phone calls all day. It's not going to happen. Same thing with your body. If you're not charging up because you're throwing on blue blockers all day because you think blue light's so bad for you,
Right.
you're screwing yourself up royally.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I get blue light on purpose as much as I can, and like in the daytime, I don't wear sunglasses. I'll even like open my sunroof on my car as much as possible, roll the windows down if it's not too smoggy or noisy.
Yeah.
But like, I want that blue light in my eyes in the daytime because that's when you're supposed to. And all this stuff sounds weird to people. That like my friends bust my balls so much with the. You come in my house at night, it's all amber light. You can't see where the hell you're going. You like bump into the wall. It's so dark. You know, it's like the
Yep.
opposite of everywhere else you go. And, you know, of course, the blue blocking glasses and all this stuff. But it's like, dude, you don't have to be a scientist to look back a couple million years of evolution, like you said. And that's always where I go back to see that the way we live is not normal and it's not healthy. And like the LED lights, no one even had to tell me that those were bad for me. Just if I walk in a room, like the room I'm in right now, I have like an overhead fan that has one of those bright white/blue LED lights. The minute I turn that on, my brain gets scrambled. I mean, it's like you can just feel it. Your biology's going, wait, what? This is non-native light. This is an alien light source, right?
Right. Well, and a lot of people, they laugh at the fact, oh, our ancestors millions of years ago, and they just don't resonate with that. Well, fine. You can resonate with the fact that in 1950s, even half of the farms here in Kentucky, for example, did not have electricity. And so even if we're not talking about going super far back, we could go less than 100 years ago, and we could talk about places where the dark night sky still existed. Now we've basically lost the night sky, except for places like Big Bend and Southwest Texas. You've got a few dark places in Arizona, but beyond that, the night sky is pretty much gone. And this is affecting wildlife too. So this is not just humans. This is affecting turtles. Like down in Florida, you've got all these turtles, and especially along the Gulf, that they're getting confused now because the turtles typically they're going to head towards the brightest light source, which at night would be the moon, pre-electricity, but now they're heading towards the city. So this is why part of the reason why leatherbacks and all these other epic species of turtles are becoming endangered, it's due to light pollution. So this is not just a human species issue. This is a issue for owls as well, because they need to have complete darkness so that they can't be seen coming in. It's making it more difficult for them to hunt. So yeah, this is a species-wide issue, and this is why incandescent lighting is the best thing out there, because you've still got a filament in there that's going to somewhat replicate a fire, and it's going to be pretty low on the Kelvin scale, meaning it's going to be closer to hues of orange and red versus hues of blue and white. And so if you do use light, like right now I'm talking to you, I've got no lights on. I've got a window right in front of me, so it gives me pretty good lighting for the video. If I ever do use a light, I've got a lamp here, and it's got a clear incandescent bulb on it. That's about the best you can do. But I've got a little baby. I've got a 1-year-old daughter, so my wife and I, we candle down pretty early now, and we typically don't use any artificial light past 8 o'clock. And now here in Kentucky, it's light until almost 10 o'clock. So we're going to bed when it's still light outside, but we've got blackout curtains.
Dude, was it tough to get your wife on board with this kind of stuff?
Well,
Or was she already like, you know, like a biohacker into health and stuff like that? Or did you have to convert her? As I've had like my last girlfriend always want to watch Netflix like on the, you know, the TV in the bedroom, which doesn't even have cable. It's not even a smart TV. It's just like basically a laptop monitor, you know?
yep.
And I always want to keep it on Flux, and she's like, dude, this looks like shit. Like, this is retarded. I'm not gonna watch my favorite show like look orange, you know, because she was really into photography and stuff. I was like, so I would either have to wear my lame orange glasses or just be blasted with blue light. So how do you get your partner to like go along with this stuff?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, man. Fortunately, we were together. We started dating 2009, so it's been a little while, and I had a TV then, but I got rid of my TV in 2010 after I realized I wasn't watching it anymore, except for Planet Earth. Like if I was gonna vaporize some cannabis and watch some Planet Earth, that would be that
That
would be an
sounds
enjoyable
that
time.
actually sounds awesome. I wish
It
I could do that still.
It, it w-
That's
it was
funny.
great. It was great. So that would be the only real reason that I used a TV. But I got rid of the TV, and so of course, then people say, "Well, you've still got laptops." We did watch stuff on laptops, but we slowly just progressed to getting so busy that we just didn't even have time to do any sort of media use at night. And now, especially with the baby, by the time she puts the baby down, 7:30, she may play on her phone, but I do have her use the Twilight app, and that's what I use for Androids. The Twilight app, it's pretty darn good. You can actually control the spectrum, so I put it as low as you can go, which is like 1500 Kelvin. You can crank the intensity up, and then you can dim the screen. So it looks like a rose-colored screen by the time you're looking at it. If we do any media at night, now some of the other strategies like getting rid of gluten and dairy and healing up your gut and getting rid of allergenic foods. That was more troublesome, but kind of fortunately in disguise, my wife had a skin issue. She was covered like head to toe in basically hives. And I said, babe, we've got to go get you checked out. We went to a dermatologist and they came back with all these different allergens that were coming from her skincare products. So then I was able to get her over to natural organic skincare products, which I was wanting to do for such a long time because the artificial fragrances and the phthalates and all that stuff she was using bothered me. And from a chemical perspective, so she had to switch over to fix her skin. And then lately she had this rash in between her two fingers here. And I told her it was probably gluten or dairy. If you were quote unquote cheating, even just one dose where you're getting gluten, you can elevate your antibodies for up to 6 months from one exposure. And I've seen this on stool testing. I run a stool test called a GI map on every single client. It's a DNA based test, so it's super accurate. I call it the lie detector test, and it's got gluten antibodies that you can measure in the stool. And I've had people tell me they were away from gluten for months or years. I had a lady said she hadn't eaten gluten in years. Her antibodies were through the roof, which, as you know, gluten antibodies can start attacking your tissue. Like I thought what was going on with my wife, attacking her skin. For women, it can attack your thyroid. So then you get Hashimoto's disease, which is autoimmune thyroid disease. It can attack your joints. You've got rheumatoid arthritis then, or multiple sclerosis. All this can come from gluten antibodies. And that finally gave me the power. Like, babe, look,
Right.
these antibodies are there.
Right.
You've got to get this under control. And a little bit off the subject of her, but I had a female client a couple weeks ago. She said, Evan, I've been off gluten for years. And I said, well, I want to believe you, but you're getting gluten from somewhere. Where is it coming from? And it found out that her chapstick, although it was an organic chapstick, the last ingredient was wheat germ oil. And that was
No
created these
way.
massive antibodies.
Wow. See, that's the thing when you have, a family member or loved one or a close friend or whatever. I, I have, just full disclosure here, I have major control issues. I think most of us and I'm not going to point the finger at you, but many people I know within the field, that are like super into health and they have all these restrictions and rules and diets and stuff, tend to be kind of controlling. Me, I mean,
Well,
I
it's
don't.
natural. It's natural because you care about people. It's not
Yeah.
you're a bad
Well,
person.
no,
You
but
just,
here's the thing though. There's like a fine line between like trying to control someone else and caring about them, So
yeah.
I've had to like find where that line is for myself, and what you're describing where you're like, "Oh, score my," kind of in a way like you're like it's a blessing because the wife had this issue so now she'll listen to you. I've had
Yeah.
that with friends too, like, "Dude, you're crazy. All this, why do you do all that stuff? Just eat whatever." And I'm like, "Okay." And then all of a sudden they come down with some ailment, and then they come crying to me, "What do I do? What do I do?" And I said, "I told you, man. You probably lactose intolerant. You're eating casein. You're eating gluten. You're eating soy, corn, blah, blah, blah. The main offenders, canola oil, all that inflammatory stuff." And then they'll listen to me. Or I'll have like people that won't listen to me, but I'll interview someone that says the exact thing I've been saying. And then they're like, "Oh, the doctor said it. Okay, now I believe you." I'm like, "I've been telling you this for 2 years, and now just because like someone on my show verified what I've been saying scientifically, now you." Anyway, okay, that's funny. You're like reading my mail here because I wanted to get into the gluten piece, but we'll jump back into it. But I want to rewind because I'm really focused on this light bit right now, especially after Dr. Cruz got me all psyched out. So, okay, let's start with let's go back to the devices, because I really want some really solid takeaways for people, because I think people hear this stuff. Oh, my iPhone's bad for me. Oh, my computer's bad for me. Oh well. And I want really solid solutions. So what I use is something called F.Lux. For you guys listening or watching on YouTube, those of you that are going to watch this, and it kind of, is set to the light cycle. So at dusk, it like turns your screen kind of orange and stuff. So what Evan's saying is that F.Lux is not really great because the temperature is not awesome. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, it's not going to cut it. And even if it looks amber, you may not be able to detect it with the naked eye, but Mercola has measured it, and
Right.
there's still massive peaks in the blue spectrum. And that's the issue with it. So you
Okay.
want to use Iris. You can go
Okay,
to,
tell us about Iris.
yeah, so iristech.co is the website. I can't remember if he's Russian or where he's from. I think he charges maybe like $2 one-time fee if you want to get the pro version. I run it all day. I've got it running right now, Luke. So I'm looking at you. I've got my color temperature set to 2300 Kelvin, which says dim incandescent. I'm on a MacBook. And so you can adjust the Kelvin. I run it 100% of the time at 2300 Kelvin. So my screen is always basically orange, even during the day. Now, is blue light bad during the day? Not really. Now, is artificial blue light bad during the day? If you've got outside sources, like a window, it's not as bad for you. Now, if you're just in a completely dark hall and all your eyes and body has is one light source, it's a lot more impactful on hormonal rhythms. And I've seen this because I ask people, where do they work? What's your lighting situation? Are you under fluorescence? Are you under LED? So I've got a lot of lab testing behind the scenes that I'm looking at with clients to verify my claims. And what I found is people that have windows or other light sources, natural light sources, if that's combined with an artificial source such as an LED or a fluorescent or a laptop or computer, tablet, iPhone, they tend to do better off. Now, if it's just them in the dark room with Netflix, yeah, that can be a problem. Now, with the Iris, though, I think, don't quote me, but I think it's got some anti-flicker on it built into it as well. So that can help with the eye fatigue. My eyes started getting really exhausted at the end of the day because I was doing Skype calls with people and emails and all of that. Once I put this Iris on, my eyes are never tired anymore.
Are you
So
serious, dude?
I
'Cause
swear.
I became nearsighted like a few months ago, seemingly suddenly. My eyes just went wacky, and I can't see like a license plate a couple of cars ahead. And
I'm convinced you can reverse it.
I've been talking to this guy Jake Steiner, who I heard on Daniel Vitalis' show, and he has a site called endmyopia.com, I think it is, and it's a blog
Yeah.
all about. He teaches people how to like do these exercises and crap and go outdoors and get a lot of sunlight and reverse it. Mine's very mild, but I swear to God, it came from computers. I just know it. It's like,
No, I guarantee it did because my eyes did the same thing when I was using Flux.
right.
And then I chatted with Mercola. He goes, no, Flux is crap. You've got to use Iris. So then I switched over, and it's much better. And he's got it. I believe he's got it for iOS and Android as
Cool.
well.
Oh,
So
so
get that.
you could put it on your phone?
I believe.
Wow.
You have to
Okay,
look at the
cool.
website.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. And those of you listening, as I always say, go to lukestory.com. Right on my homepage, I've got a thing that says join the tribe. If you sign up for that, we'll send you all of the links to everything like this that we're talking about. Because I know how annoying it is. Like when I was listening to a podcast yesterday, like a Smart Passive Income, this great business podcast. And the guy who started Lead Pages was like laying out this whole business plan and like dropping all these knowledge bombs. And I'm in my car and I'm like, shit, like I'm never going to remember when I haven't, when I get home to like go to that guy's website, look up the episode number, like who does that? So if you get on my mailing list, I'll send you all of these links, which I wish more podcasters did because there's so much value. Like I'd be listening to us right now going, what was that thing called? Iris? What? Never mind. And then like ruin my eyes for the next 5 years because I don't have that resource.
Well, I'll have to sign up for your email list then. Are you telling me secretly that I should be emailing out my show notes?
Yeah, dude, good. It's a good idea. I mean,
Okay.
you know what I'm saying? It's like, what else am I going to put in my newsletter? I don't like sell people stuff. I'm just saying, hey, here's this rad information I found and I'm sharing it. So that's what my newsletter is really for. I only email people when I release a podcast. So for example, when this episode comes out, probably like in August, it'll be like, whatever I call this episode, blah, 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 with Evan Brand. And then the links and all of that stuff will actually be in that email, as well as the video and an audio player. So every
Right.
newsletter is like a complete composite podcast with all of that content within that newsletter. And
Sweet.
yeah,
So
my listeners dig it, because then it's like, even if they don't listen to it right away, they're like, oh, that's interesting. Like protect your eyes with iris, whatever, click, and then they can get that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So back to action
Yeah,
steps.
yeah, yeah.
For me, there's three big pieces of the puzzle when it comes to achieving health. Light is a huge one, without a doubt. If you ignore light, I had cold hands, cold feet for a while. Now I thought it was due to me having parasite infections. I had 2 parasites. I had H. pylori. I had other various bacterial infections. I had yeast in my gut. I had a lot of gut issues that I had to treat. For people that didn't know about my history, I had IBS. I had depression issues for many, many, many years. And I believe it was due partially to the malnutrition because I was getting robbed of my trace minerals and micronutrients and neurotransmitter precursors because of gut bugs. So I treated my gut. My IBS was gone. Depression was probably 85% gone. And so I put a huge emphasis on the gut. I test everyone for gut bugs. I say everyone's guilty until proven innocent with gut bugs. But light is, yeah, so
That's
light is
great.
another piece. I mean, I had cold hands, cold feet, and people say, oh, it's magnesium. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. For me, the game changer was when I really started emphasizing barefoot and light exposure. And now my hands, some days maybe cold hands, cold feet, but I've almost cured it just by focusing more on grounding myself by barefoot walking in the grass every single day, plus a lot of morning sun exposure, 15, 20 minutes first thing in the morning. I take my daughter and I just walk around the neighborhood carrying her.
That's cool. You just described my routine too. Before we wrap up the light piece,
Yeah.
so we've got the iris, what we can put on our computer, maybe on our phones. We should definitely at least use Nightshift, put those screens on, like do whatever you can to block that blue light. Now, in terms of your in-home lighting, say in your work environment, your office, in your home, what would you say the hierarchy of lighting is? What I do, as I said, is I have incandescent bulbs that are like these. The only way you can really get them is on Amazon, and they're decorative bulbs. So they're like those antique filament bulbs. You know, they're like
Yep.
vintage light bulbs or whatever. Or I just,
Edison, yeah.
yeah, the Edison bulbs, because those have, not just blue, but they have a more of a full spectrum, and they're not that bright either. So at night I have those, and then the daytime, if I can't get enough natural light, I'll use a full spectrum incandescent bulb, which are also like those kind of decorative bulbs on Amazon. And I don't know what the Kelvin is, but that's kind of what I've got going on in the inside of the house. What would you recommend for people in terms of from best to worst?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. You're probably in the best category. Make sure you take a double look at your Edison bulbs because even now at Home Depot and Lowe's, those Edison bulbs, they've now swapped those over. They've taken the filaments out. They're now using LED Edison. So they look vintage, but they've actually got an LED in there, a light emitting diode, which you do not want due to the harsh
Ah,
spectrum.
oh
So,
man, God
yeah.
damn it! It's
So
like, well,
I know.
okay. So, and for you guys listening too, I recently found this out that because I'm very like conspiratorial. I always think the government is trying to kill us and control us, which they probably are in some cases. But I'm always like, why do these companies make things that kill you? And it turns out like with an LED that doesn't have any warm colors, just a simple way to save energy because it takes more energy to create a warm light versus a cool light, right? So
I don't know about that because so these LED bulbs, these Edison bulbs,
yeah,
they are actually a warm color. They're advertising a warm colored LED Edison bulb, but still, I
yeah,
wouldn't trust it because I suspect there's still peaks in the range
right.
that still include blue light.
Okay.
So best is where you're at. I think you're spot on with the incandescents, especially the Edison bulbs. They're power hogs, but how much light do you really need at night? I mean, you might only need one bulb, so it's a 40-watt incandescent. So what? Worst would be LEDs, absolutely. And then also, I would just encourage people to take a look at your lifestyle because a lot of times people are doing mindless things in the evening that require light that they really don't need to be doing. Like if you're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm guilty of this, which is why I removed Instagram from my phone, and
Oh,
I
you
hardly
did?
ever post there.
I just tagged you. Your Instagram's not just paleo, right?
It's I changed it. It's
Oh, you did. I
Mr.
just tagged you right now
You'll
on
have
the
to
call.
retag me. It's Mr. So Mr. Evan Brand because Evan Brand was already taken, so now it's Mr. Evan Brand.
All right. I'm
You
gonna
have to retag me, but I
I
removed
will.
Instagram from my phone because I realized what am I doing? I'm not actually accomplishing anything. And then someone mentioned the quote, "Consuming is the opposite of producing." And I thought, I thought, oh, consuming is the opposite of producing. Oh my God. And as a content creator, I thought this is a game changer. This is a big deal. So I completely uninstalled Instagram. I hardly ever post there. Uh, it's just not my place to shine. And so I'm focusing on YouTube and podcasting because that's what I love, and I can do that stuff during the day. And it just, I don't know, I love it so much better. So back to my point, reevaluate your lifestyle, figure out what are you actually doing in the evening that requires light. You may find that you don't need light at all. And what we do is we have a salt lamp in the bathroom of our master bedroom. So if we've got the baby sleeping in our room, we just have that salt lamp on. So if we do need to do anything so we don't run into the wall, which we've both busted our noses several times due to the pitch blackness in our rooms, we've got that salt lamp. So we will turn on a little bit of light if we do need to brush our teeth or do something.
Right.
Ideally, though, your sleeping environment and your evening environment should be so dark that you can't see your hand right in front of your face.
Yeah, that's what I've got going. I had to get very creative in order to do that. Okay, so LED lights in the home or office, the absolute worst. Then what would be the next worst? Fluorescent, like fluorescent tubes, or those curly CFL, whatever freaking.
Yeah,
bulbs?
CFLs, because they also, you'll have to listen to Mercola. He did an interview with Samuel Milham, who wrote the book Dirty Electricity and the Diseases of Civilization. He's pushing 90 years old. I had him on my podcast a few years ago. He's actually measured the EMF that comes off of CFL bulbs. So even if we're not talking about the spectrum issue, just sitting by a CFL bulb, especially if let's say you've got an end table right next to your couch and you're reading a book with the CFL next to your head, it's emanating about a 4-foot range of high frequency noise as well as magnetic fields that you're exposing yourself to, and you can measure this. So that's another reason to avoid CFL curly bulbs as well as incandescents, incandescents, I meant the fluorescents. And then you work your way towards best. You've got incandescents, and then even better is natural light. If you can hang out by a window, I mean, here it's light outside until 9:30. So if we're sitting by a window, we've pretty much got as much light as we need outside. And then you can go to maybe a salt lamp, a Himalayan salt lamp. You're going to have a nice little good glow with that. And then even better would be a candle, an unscented, organic candle that's not burning lead and all of that into your air.
Yeah, I know that's the thing with a lot of, dude, the stuff goes so deep, that a lot of the candles are super toxic too. It's like you can really tell the difference too if you get like a totally natural, like a beeswax candle, and you light that in your house. It has a totally different smell and even a different like temperature of light than one of these, like, I don't know what they're made out of, like petroleum wax, like some weird stuff with lead in the wick. Okay, cool. So that's great. I think that's some real value for people. And then when you're unable to have the right kind of lighting installed in your home or on your computer or office, whatever, where are you at with like wearing different blue blocking glasses like at appropriate times? Do you mess with any of that, or is that just like a phase that we all tried out and then got sick of, or what?
Well, so I've got 3 pairs. They're all sitting in the closet right here behind me. I've got the new expensive fancy ones that came out, the biohacked ones. I did a YouTube video on it because now red goggles are the cool thing. Orange is out and red is in because now apparently there's green spectrums that can be just as impactful on melatonin production that the orange blue blockers that everybody's wearing are not covering. And so the red is supposed to be the new cool. And you could buy those on Amazon for like $9. They're going to be the same. They're like glasses that protect you from laser beams. Those are red. And those are supposed to protect you from the green spectrums, which are so close. If you look at the light spectrum, they're so close to blue in terms of the wavelength that they're similar to blue. So now red. Do I wear them though? I don't. I mean, I'm home so often. I hardly ever travel. I hardly ever frequent places where there is bad lighting. If I do go to the grocery store or something, I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm going to get back out into the sunshine right after, and it's probably going to reset whatever damage I did. So I honestly think that some of the neurosis around, well, and also it's a great marketing ploy, right? A lot of these companies are popping up and they're doing affiliate programs and all this about blue blocking glasses, which cool, no hate against anybody. It's nothing wrong with making money. However, I believe that there's a lot of unwarranted fear about this issue just due to miseducation and misinformation. And a lot of people are cashing in to make a quick buck. But in reality, the stress of worrying about it is probably going to create more of a cortisol response. You can measure it for yourself, put on a heart rate variability device, measure your nervous system. I guarantee if you start thinking about how bad this is, your heart rate score is probably going to be much worse by just the stress of the thought of it as opposed to the actual implication from the source.
That's what I was alluding to earlier, is the whole like control issue, the orthorexia with your dietary restrictions. And oh man, I mean, it's just a lot of work. And I think that's kind of off-putting to people that, they're like, oh, I want to be healthy, but I don't want to be an extremist and have to control every little thing 24/7. I myself have loosened up about a lot of this stuff just because of the neurosis factor. And I'm kind of going, what's worse, like being so goddamn worried about the light, or just dealing with it and knowing, listen, we're all going to go and you just do the best you can. So I'm still probably pretty extreme compared to your average Joe, but I've definitely like let go of some of those, more controlling things, because it gives you a certain degree of tension, when you're always like paranoid about everything like that.
Well, and here's what I do. I mean, anytime I have something like that that's overwhelming me, I just try to turn it into an action step. So if you come across something, gluten's bad, dairy's bad. Oh my God, I have to focus on removing this from my diet. I don't even think about it. I just think, wow, what do I get to eat? I've got pastured bison. I've got elk. I've got wild boar. I've got local grass-fed beef. I've got organic veggies. I've got coconut. I've got all sorts of avocados and macadamias. It's like if I just focus on the good part of things, the bad part really becomes irrelevant. And I believe if you get caught up in this negative spin about everything, oh, I can't do chocolate anymore, or I can't do kombucha because it's feeding my candida in my gut, whatever it is, focus on what you've got left. Ideally, you have zero fear, you have zero guilt, you have zero stress around your lifestyle, and it really just becomes your new norm. And maybe you do have to become more of a homebody. Maybe you do have to ditch some friends. Maybe you've got to go through a breakup because your partner just won't listen to you, or they just think you're too weird. Maybe you've got to go through some of the relationship stuff, but those relationships, those are going to impact your health more than, oh, I ate some grass-fed ice cream. Grass-fed ice cream is probably not going to destroy you as much as a terrible relationship.
Dude, you just described the last 2 years of my life. I digress. Okay.
And this is all personal experience. I mean,
it is, dude. It is, yeah.
I've dealt with all of this, and I see that here. And here's the deal, man. And you know this. We all do it. This is human nature. It's much easier to focus on minutia, like, is this air purifier going to filter out VOCs or not, and formaldehyde? I'm going to worry about the minutia of, do I have the ultimate best air filter in the world, or I've got a terrible partner that treats me terribly, and I just don't want to get rid of them because it's too uncomfortable, or they provide the income for me, or we just signed a lease together, or we just got married, or whatever. That stuff is going to affect your health far more than any of the diet, lifestyle, fitness piece ever. However, it's not as sexy. It's harder to deal with. It's more emotionally draining. And people want to act like it doesn't matter. People, will shove emotional stuff under the rug. Like, I had a woman, she couldn't lose weight. We had tried ketogenic diet. She did have parasites, which can be a massive source of inflammation in the gut, therefore causing leaky gut, therefore causing antibodies to go up, therefore causing her to be hypothyroid, therefore causing her to have elevated reverse T3, which is an inactive thyroid hormone, which causes you to store body fat. So yeah, she did have the whole biochemical piece as a factor, but once we had addressed the gut infections, we got rid of the yeast, we supported her adrenals, we got her detox pathways working better, we started her with some methylation support, we fixed all that. She still didn't lose weight. I was confused. I thought, this is the first time this has ever happened. What's going on? I said, there's something missing. Like, what are you not telling me? This doesn't make sense. She said, well, my husband and I, which now they're going through a divorce currently as we speak. She goes, my husband and I have been arguing for as long as I could remember. She says, we never agree on anything. Our sex life is terrible. It's affecting the kids. It's affecting our sleep. We're not sleeping well anymore. We hardly talk to each other. We don't even eat at the dinner table together anymore. All she did was talk to me about it. And then all of a sudden she's lost 20 pounds in 6 weeks. And I was like, how is this possible? Like, what are repressed emotions doing to our body that we don't fully understand? I don't have a full answer of what changed. I just know that something had happened with these repressed emotions. And once she revealed it, and I get goosebumps now talking about it. Of course, once she cried to me about it, then all of a sudden she lost weight. And maybe, yes, maybe people could say, oh, it's a vanity-based goal. She just wanted to lose fat. But something else was going on in the body until she released it. All the light hacks, all the diet hacks, all the sleep and turn off the Wi-Fi at night, none of it moved the needle as opposed to just talking about relationship stress. So,
dude, so right on, so important. I mean, you've been into this stuff for a while, and I have too. I think that it's easy to get distracted with some of the low-hanging fruit, because it's interesting when you start learning about all this stuff. Okay, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix that, eat this, eat that. And it's like, I 100% agree that it's more about your emotional and spiritual point of center. And I think that myself and a lot of people, it's like you keep yourself distracted and busy doing a lot of this other shit because it's scarier to face the stuff that's really going on inside. You know, I just did this thing called the Hoffman process, which I'm sure I'm going to do a show on soon. It's like a week long. It's just so gnarly, dude. I mean, it's beautiful, but gnarly. It's a week long thing where you're looking at your childhood and trauma and your parents and, negative patterns in your life. And you're sequestered away in the woods in Northern California for 7 days, no phone, no nothing, just you and your heart and soul, and like a sort of a program and a formula by which to look at all this stuff and deal with it. And it's like, dude, I came out of there 1,000 pounds lighter. You know what I mean?
my
It's like,
God.
I mean, in a week of doing that, it probably helped me more on a physiological level and my nervous system level than 2 years of the perfect diet and the perfect lighting.
Well, let me share this with you, man. I think you're going to really geek out on this. And this is the first time I've mentioned this because, one, it's a relatively new development, and two, I wasn't aware of what I was holding on to. When I lived in Austin, Texas, I told you I moved down there back in 2013 to go work for a supplement company called Onnit. And I got promoted to work for the CEO, and great job, great people, great company, but I was homesick. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to stay in Texas. It was too hot. Everything was poisonous, and there were thorns everywhere. You couldn't walk barefoot in Texas. There's too many damn spikes. Every time you go out walking barefoot in Texas, you either get bit by fire ants or you get a thorn in your foot. So,
are you serious?
I swear it's
that's funny because
insane.
everyone's always like, dude, Austin's so dope. We should all move there. Like any homie that goes there's like, let's move there. I'm like, if
Well,
you can't walk
it's a
around
great place
barefoot,
to
I'm
visit.
out.
Great place to visit. For me, it wasn't a good place because it was more of, hello, nice to meet you. What can you do for me? And it's just, that's not the way it is in Kentucky. It was just completely different. I just felt like it was, I don't know if you call it pretentious or what the name is, but it was just a bit too uppity for me. It was more about.
You definitely wouldn't like it in Hollywood then, Evan.
Probably not. Probably not. So anyhow, and you'll have to come to Kentucky one day. I've got some cool stuff to show you here. But anyhow, long story short, I had some fear and I had some vulnerability down there because I took my now wife, I took my fiance down there away from her family. She had never been away before. I had never been away on my own. I had lived in other states with family members, but I'd never lived fully away on my own. We had no friends. We had no family. It was tough to meet people because everyone was so established into their cliques. It's kind of a little, if you're not in the club, you can't get in. It was very difficult. And at that moment, I wasn't aware of me storing those emotions away. And I talked with my buddy Justin, who'd been on your show, and I told him about this pain in my belly button because I used to lift a bunch of heavy kettlebells and I had tore my abdominal wall. I thought it was a hernia, but I tore my abdominal wall. And I got the ultrasound when I was in Texas. They said it's a tore abdominal wall. Be careful. You could turn this into a hernia easily. No heavy lifting. I said, okay. But still, 2 years later, I was still affected by this and certain random movements. I would hit the mountain bike trails. It would irritate it, and I'd have that sharp pain come back in my belly button. I talked with Justin. He goes, man, it sounds like you've got some issue with your fascia. Why don't you go see a myofascial release therapist, a myofascial release technique therapist? I said, okay, I'm going to go for it because typical massage is not doing anything. Float tanks are not doing anything. Although it's relaxing, it's not healing it. I went to this myofascial release person. We're talking in July, you and I. This was actually last Friday and the week before, so very new development. I went into her. You lay on the table, and they start to work on your fascia, which is basically like an inner web, essentially, where you can store scar tissue. But I've also learned you can store memories there, and you can store emotions in the fascia. And this is crazy. And she starts working on my gut. I'm laying on my back. She's working on my gut, and you can feel these releases, almost like small rubber bands popping. I can feel these releases in my gut. And for a while, it got very intense. Like the pain started coming back. It feels like a burning pain when someone's working on your fascia. It felt like she had a match and she was burning my stomach. Like it was very intense. And she goes, Evan, I'm sensing some type of emotion here too. And she's like, what type of emotion is it? And she just called me out. And my gut immediately said fear and vulnerability. And she said, from what? And I said, I don't know. And she goes, well, when you had this injury, what was going on? And I was like, oh my God, the exact time that I injured my gut and tore the abdominal wall, that was when I was most fearful and I was most vulnerable. You know, I felt deserted. I felt homesick. And she goes, well, it's time to let that go. And I just said, okay. And I mentally just said, okay, I'm done. I'm done being fearful. I'm done being vulnerable. I'm back in Kentucky. I've got my friends, my family, my social network is back. I've got it. Boom. Immediately. And this is a physical release. Immediately, the tension in the gut disappeared. The sharp pain that had intensified went from like an 8 to maybe a 1.5 instantly. And she goes, whoa. She goes, did you feel that? She goes, I felt it in my hand. I said, hell yes, I felt it. I said, what was that? And she goes, well, like I told you, apparently fascia stores both physical trauma as like scar tissue, but also emotions and memories. So apparently you had released something. And for the first time in the last several years, I've been able to officially get back on the mountain bike without aggravating that issue. I rode pretty damn hard over the last week, no gut pain at all, which had been from the last 2 years. Every time I rode, I knew I was going to have to pay that price of that tight tension in the gut. It's gone. And that was only 2 sessions, about 1 hour each.
Wow. So you're able to find, alternative therapy and stuff like that where you live? People
Yeah.
that do
So
sort of that fringe stuff?
So I'm outside of Louisville. We've got about 1 million people here in the city. So it's a pretty big city. We've got pretty much every therapist you could look for. Maybe not some of the super out there therapists, but we've got a lot.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, man, that makes so much sense. That reminds me, years ago I did a session, no, actually a couple sessions. I was trying to quit smoking, actually, is why I did it. But I did these sessions with these Maori healers from New Zealand. You know, that they're all like tattooed up. The guys they kind of look like Samoans. They're just these
Yep.
huge, not just fat, but just huge guys. And it was a family, and they do these ancient, traditional Maori healing sessions, which are body work sessions. And my eyes were closed, so I don't know what they were doing, but dude, the people that were in there before, it was in someone's house in Topanga Canyon. It was a very fringe kind of trippy thing, but I'm in like the waiting room, essentially, like the foyer of the house. And then you could hear other people getting worked on, dude. And people are like, just screaming and crying. I'm like, dude, are people getting murdered in there? And they lay me down, and I just surrendered to the process. I'm like, this is weird, but whatever. I just want to quit smoking, which I eventually did. So who knows? It may have worked, but it just took a while. And they start working on me. I don't know what they were doing, dude. The amount of pressure and where they were applying pressure is mostly in my legs, like the back of my legs. If they were standing on me or they were super strong or what. But, dude, I started like flashing back to all these traumatic experiences in my life. They didn't tell me to do that. It's just when they went into certain areas of my body, just childhood trauma, really shameful, hurtful moments in my life, I just started to release all this stuff. And I was bawling like the other people that had gone before me. But I wasn't bawling from the pain. I was bawling from this emotional release. It was the crazy experience. I'll never forget that. And there's been many other times since, but that was my first connection of like, oh, weird, my body's making me recall certain things like that. So that's a very powerful story, man.
It's weird that the amount of pressure she was applying, she said it was hardly anything. I was like, you're killing me. Like, this is so intense right now. I said, I'm going to work through it. I was breathing like, oh, come on, Evan. She goes, I'm barely pushing. And I was like, why is it burning? And she's like, that's just your fascia. That's how it works. So I encourage people, if you've got issues, structural issues, you've got random back pain that comes up and you just can't fix it. She worked on my back too, which mainly I've resolved by sitting less. check out myofascial release therapist. It's some good stuff.
And the fascia, I heard someone describe it as this. It's like when you buy, a fillet piece of beef or something, there's like this silvery sort of skin around that muscle, that's a muscle meat we're eating. Is that the fascia?
That's it.
It's like this weird kind of film, right? Almost.
Yeah, I believe that's it. Yeah, and she said it's really just the spider web. It's kind of the underlayer of our tissue. And when you injure things, not only are you injuring the muscle, but the fascia will try to come in and heal you up. But it's like things don't heal up perfectly, so you've got to get to the root cause. So yeah, therapeutic massage can help, but if you're not getting to the root cause, really, it's like root cause body work instead of functional medicine. It's like functional medicine of the hands or something. She's working into the fascia. Apparently you can release and somehow heal the fascia and let go is really what the process is. Your body holds on to stuff is kind of the way she explained it to me.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, on to the next one. So one of the main things I wanted to talk to you about, I have your book here, which you sent me a while ago, The Everything Guide to Nootropics, which is really great. I love the way that you did it because it's very simple, and that's the way that I need to read. Like, I don't need 10 pages on ashwagandha. I need a paragraph that just gives me the basic gist because I just kind of feel things out like that. And so you cover a lot of great stuff in here. I wanted to highlight a few of those things because I get a lot of questions from listeners about specifically smart drugs and nootropics. Where do I start? Which ones are safe? Which ones are natural? Which ones aren't? And I've used a lot of this stuff with varying degrees of success. So I wanted to cover just some different herbs and nootropics, smart drugs, all that kind of stuff, because it happens to be, something that's been on my mind lately. So I want to run through a few different things, but first I'd like to just ask what your experience and relationship to nootropics is, and if you could just explain kind of what I'm talking about in terms of mental performance and focus and all that.
Sure. So nootropics, basically brain vitamins. Nootropics, it's a word that has gotten diluted in the last 5 years since about 2011, 2012 is when I first started getting into them. The word has gotten so diluted that most people who call their product a nootropic, it's probably not a nootropic because there's a specific set of parameters that make something a nootropic. Like it does not sedate you necessarily. You can still perform at a high level. There's no side effects, toxicity, etc. There's a lot of companies out there that tag themselves as a nootropic, but there's actually risk associated with some of those. Like modafinil, it's not a nootropic. It's definitely not. There's definitely implications for using it and abusing it. What I mainly focus on with people is herbal nootropics. I've actually got a formula. It's called Neurosynergy. I can send you some if you want to try it, but it's an herbal nootropic.
Please do. I'm out of my CellTep right now, and I'm like, oh man, I really feel it when I don't take nootropics. Like,
yeah.
I become more dim and dull-witted. It's for real. Like, I definitely am able to quantify the results. Okay, so carry on.
Yeah, so I actually did some behind-the-scenes work with Natural Stacks, but they didn't want my advice. They had hired me to do a podcast for them. And I started giving them advice behind the scenes, like, hey, I would change this and this formula, this and this formula. And they're like, we don't like your podcast episode. You've got some people associated with other supplement companies, so peace out. And they hired somebody else to do the podcast. But anyway, I think some of the stuff I've come up with is superior to the CellTep. I think it can work, but I've got more studies. Cool. More PubMed verifying human studies, not rat studies, verifying the efficacy of ingredients. But brain vitamins, essentially, that's what you could categorize nootropics. My first exposure to a nootropic was phenibut or phenyl GABA, which is incredible. You got to be careful with it.
I love
yeah,
that.
Exactly. See, that's why.
It's so hard to like only do it a couple days a week. Like I almost took some this morning, and sorry, dude, I'm like the king interrupter, but it's just how
You're
I roll.
Fine.
Our interviews always are more conversations anyway. But I was going to take some today, and I'm like, nope, tomorrow's 4th of July, Luke. You're going to want to be in a really fun, relaxed, good mood tomorrow. So hold off on the phenibut today and take it tomorrow, which I did. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, so it works on the GABA receptors. GABA is basically the brakes of the brain. So typically people hear about serotonin, they hear about dopamine, you hear about norepinephrine, epinephrine, you hear about all these various hormones and neurotransmitters, but GABA is pretty underrated, underappreciated. Conventional medicine, conventional doctors or therapists, they're going to put you on GABA modifying drugs such as Valium, Xanax, lorazepam, benzodiazepines, which have a high risk potential for addiction, withdrawal, etc. They're terrible. They're terrible drugs, and they're unnecessary in most cases because you can use things like phenibut or phenibut. It's a phenyl GABA. So when you take a phenyl group, you add it to the GABA molecule, it makes it much, much more small, and it allows it to pass through the blood-brain barrier, which is normally a pretty impenetrable force, unless you've got leaky gut. And if you've got leaky gut, now we know that you've probably got leaky brain as well, meaning if you take a straight GABA supplement, say 500 milligrams as a test, if you get relaxed or you notice any effect from GABA by itself, you've got a leaky brain. You've got, if you've heard of intestinal permeability, you've got permeable brain barrier, which is not good, because if you live in LA and you've got a leaky brain and you live in LA and there's air pollution, we know that these toxins from exhaust are getting into your brain. So if you've got a leaky gut, you've got a leaky brain. And if you take GABA by itself and you get affected, you've got to do some work. Now, with phenyl GABA, it's so small that it'll go through the blood-brain barrier very easily. And it's really going to bind to those GABA receptors. And you're going to get things like increased mental clarity. You're going to get relaxation. You're going to get I consider phenibut like alcohol without the drunkenness. It's a very good social lubricant. You can do it if you're going to go to a conference, if you're going to go to let's say you're going to go to a public speaking gig, you could use phenibut for that reason, to take it and not get sedated, but still have the mental clarity. Phenibut was actually first formulated, synthesized, and used in space programs in the 70s, because the Russians needed to have their brains working well while they were in space, but they didn't want to get sedated. So they needed improved cognition without sedation, because if you're in a spaceship, well, you probably don't want to be sedated. You got to be awake. And that's how phenibut came onto the radar. And then now you've got people that are abusing it. So there's actually been a massive crackdown. It's gotten much, much harder to source phenibut due to the massive risk for abuse and withdrawal, because if you hit those GABA receptors so often, it's like playing ding dong ditch. Eventually the people aren't going to answer the door. Same thing with GABA. You can really downregulate your natural production of GABA, so then you start getting anxiety, panic attacks, shakes, phobias, etc. if you push that button too much. So I personally reserve it for very, very, very infrequent use, but it is a game changer, and it's one of the best nootropics in my book.
The stuff that I use is from a company called Lift Mode, and they use an HCl at the end, and I see this with a lot of different supplements. What does that HCl mean? Do you happen to know?
I'd have to look it up. I don't think it means anything extra. Let me see if I can type in HCl. And I've not seen this other one. So I know LiftMo, they've got a blog article where they say FAA, so that'd be free form amino acids, what that means. Now the HCl, with hydrochloric acid.
Oh, that like HCl, like you take made from beets or whatever to digest food.
It seems like it. It's a Zwitter ionic HCl salt. It has a negative and a positive electrical charge. It's highly acidic and sour. Okay, so I'm assuming that most phenibut out there is going to be the HCl version, because every phenibut I've ever tried, even if it doesn't have the HCl in the label, it's always had that highly acidic kind of sour taste to it. So I'm going to assume.
You definitely want to brush your teeth after you take phenibut. But it's interesting what you said about the FDA crackdown and all of this stuff, because Bulletproof used to make this supplement called GABA Wave, which was like a liposomal, really highly absorbable form of phenibut, and then it just disappeared. And I actually asked Dave Asprey, I was like, dude, that was like the best supplement ever. What happened? He's like, too many hassles with the man. It just wasn't worth making it. And so, because it's still hard to absorb apparently. So what he suggested that I do is I could make my own liposomal delivery of the phenibut by just taking, whatever water base, putting some brain octane or MCT oil in a blender and like blending the shit out of the phenibut, the oil and the water, and emulsifying it into the fat molecule, and then taking it like that for better absorption and more of like a.
You could.
I mean, do you think that's unnecessary? You can just
unnecessary completely.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, with when you've got the phenyl group added to it, it's already phenyl GABA, so it's already so able to cross the blood-brain barrier. I mean, the extra step sounds cool and a little bit arduous, but I've never not felt the effects.
All right, that's cool. That's good to know. Okay, so enter at your own risk, folks. Phenibut, not something to toy with because you don't want to downregulate your body's own ability to create that GABA, right? That's the idea.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
I think I told you this last time, so I'm sorry if this is repetitive, but I had a friend who turned me on to Phenibut, and he had timed his Amazon Prime deliveries to the day he ran out of his first bottle. He had another bottle arriving because he couldn't sleep, and he basically had almost like heroin-like withdrawals where he was like shaking uncontrollably if he ran out of it. So he really destroyed his neurotransmitter receptors. So it's a very highly controversial substance. It does have benefits. It's great for panic and phobias and anxiety and all of that, but very sparingly, and less is more with Phenibut. You actually get a little bit more bang for your buck if you use less. So pay attention to what people say in terms of the dosing, but just always start low. You can always add more in later. But here's the deal. Let's say 200 milligrams gives you a good feeling, and you say, well, I'm going to go take a gram, or I'm going to go take 2 grams. Yeah, you may feel a little bit more relaxed or a little bit more something altered, but look, you've just taken 5 or 10 times as much. So you've really, really impacted that receptor site much, much more. Therefore, you're going to increase your risk for addiction and withdrawal much more rapidly. So if you love the stuff, just baby dose it if you can. That way you're not going to tap out the receptor site, but you can still get the good feeling from it.
cool. Good advice. Yeah, the little scoop that comes in my powder little jug of it is tiny. I was like, that can't do anything. Let me do 4, Interesting
Yeah.
thing recently, I had a friend who is, for pain purposes, addicted to OxyContin, which is like the gnarliest synthetic opiate. So she's physically addicted to it, not recreationally. And if it runs out, it's bad news. She has to make sure that she travels with that medication and stuff. And she had started to run out. And I don't know, I was looking up Phenibut, and it's used oftentimes for opiate withdrawals. And so
Yep.
I gave her some one day, and she was like low on her medication, and it really helped her. I mean, she was like not feeling that withdrawal symptoms. It alleviated the symptoms. But then the next day, I gave her too much Phenibut, and she got super, super sick.
What happened?
Nausea, dizzy, like bedridden, just totally whacked out, like
How
not
much
feeling
was it?
good at
What
all.
was the dose?
I don't know, probably. I mean, unfortunately, eyeballed, but we were just like, hey, if 1 scoop yesterday, cured you of the opiate withdrawal, maybe 4 scoops, probably like half a teaspoon or something, like a decent kind of unmeasured scoop, but it absolutely had a really adverse reaction. So
Huh. It's
interesting.
yeah, that based on a half spoonful, that sounds like maybe 2 to 3 grams, which yeah, I mean, it could be a bit much. The good thing is, though, you'll pee most of it out pretty quickly. So you may be affected for like 8 hours if you do too much. Funny enough, speaking of adaptogens and too much and all of that, we can transition to chat about ashwagandha for a minute.
That was next on my list.
Okay.
That's funny because I've probably been doing too much of that too. I,
Well, so I believe I overdosed a bit yesterday on some ashwagandha. Now, I've been taking this formula called Adrenasue. That's a friend of mine, Aviva Ram. She's a medical doctor, but she's a master herbalist, and she's got this product called Adrenasooth, and it's got reishi in there. It's got motherwort. It's got ziziphus. I love it. It's in a tincture, and it's got ashwagandha in there. And I was trying to get the dropper to the bottom of the bottle, but I wasn't able to get it. So I thought, oh, I'm just going to pour the rest into a cup and just, shoot it down. And it went bloop into the cup. And I thought, ooh, that looked like a pretty big splash. How much was in there? And I thought, oh, whatever. It's fine. I take this almost every day. I should be fine. 20, 30 minutes later, I felt like I was floating. I was like, whoa, I never knew there was too much of ziziphus, motherwort, reishi, ashwagandha. I never knew there was such a thing. And I floated for several hours, and then eventually I kind of came back down to planet Earth. But I wouldn't say I liked it, though. I wouldn't say it was pleasurable. At first, it started out kind of like a cannabis buzz, but then it really progressed into a sort of a dizzy, slightly nauseous, almost like a drunken slumber, if you will.
Interesting. And for those listening that don't know what the hell ashwagandha is, give us a little background on that one because it's one of
Yes,
the most popular
ashwagandha.
herbs.
So it's an adaptogenic herb. The Latin is Withania somnifera. Somnifera meaning to induce sleep. So for a lot of clients I'm working with insomnia, If we fix the lifestyle issues, typically like the light at night, typically sleep gets better. But sometimes you've got people with blood sugar problems, cortisol issues, thyroid issues, etc. EMF also could influence cortisol in the evening, therefore affecting sleep. Ashwagandha can be great. Anywhere between 2 and 500 milligrams in the evening before bed can be awesome. And you can also use it in the morning, in the afternoons. It's a pretty unique adaptogen where it's not necessarily going to sedate you, but it's not necessarily going to stimulate you like coffee either. So I personally take it before breakfast or before lunch, and then I also take it before bed. And that keeps me in a pretty good place with sleep and energy, and mainly the ability to tolerate stress. So if you've got stress coming your way, maybe I can't wave a wand to get rid of your stress, but if I can change the way your nervous system responds, where you don't jump into the sympathetic fight or flight as easily, that's my primary use of adaptogenic herbs with clients, is to help modulate the stress response. And it works wonderfully for that. Now, I do like to combine it. Like I mentioned, I'll combine it with reishi or motherwort or ziziphus or albizia bark or passion flower, chamomile, lemon balm, nettle, a lot of these other modulators, and you really start to get more bang for your buck when you mix it with stuff. A really good one-two punch is ashwagandha rhodiola. Rhodiola rosea, also known as the golden root. There's a cool study on it where they took 1,200 people, and after just 3 days, like 90+% of the test subjects reported, quote unquote, less life stress. Just in 3 days of rhodiola. Rhodiola changed my life. I mean, I almost cured myself of depression going through college when I found rhodiola, and it significantly doubled or tripled my physical performance too. When I was working at a park system, I was doing a lot of hiking and biking and lugging around chainsaws and getting rid of invasive species and hauling logs and doing all sorts of physical labor. Rhodiola is really helpful for that. But when you combine it with ashwagandha, you get the calming, soothing effect from ashwagandha. So you're kind of ashwagandha is also working on GABA receptors. So you're working on the GABA receptor, but then when you've got rhodiola in the picture, you're boosting up. I don't know if it's your catecholamines. I don't know if it's hitting on adrenaline or what it's doing, but it's a really good energy booster. It's a great mood lifter too. And I like to mix those because sometimes people with anxiety or panic or phobia, rhodiola is too stimulating. So I say, okay, fine, just take 1-in-1 ratio, ashwagandha, rhodiola. They'll feel stable but uplifted at the same time.
Do you have brands that you'd recommend of both of those?
It depends. If you want to go for a tincture, I would say look up the Adrena Soothe by Herb Farm.
Oh, right.
That's got the ashwagandha, that's got the reishi in there, that's got all of it. I've actually got a new formula that I'm coming out. Of course, people will say I'm biased because it's my product, but I've got a new professional grade, something it's called the Adaptogen Tonic.
Ooh,
it's
nice.
not quite out, but I'm going to send you a bottle of it.
Dude,
and
nice.
Yeah, I've got a manufacturer in New Mexico who they do all organic, wild-crafted herbs, especially adaptogens. And so I've put together something that I think is going to be the most comprehensive yet supportive adaptogen tonic on the market, which like I said, people will say I'm biased, but I've been in the trenches with people, so it's not like I'm a person who formulates things and then just hopes that it goes viral on social media. I have to talk with the people that I give formulas, so they're going to say, Evan, look, that sucked, or I couldn't sleep after I took this formula, or I got depressed after I took that, or my energy was amazing. I get instant feedback, so I think it's a bit unique. But if you're looking for a quick fix, you want to go buy something right now, look at the entire Adrena line from Herb Farm. It's got the Soothe, it's got the Nourish, which is going to be a bit more stimulating. That's going to be your holy basil, your maca, schizandra, eleuthero, which is Siberian ginseng. And then they've got a most stimulating, which most people don't need, called Adrena Uplift. That's got licorice in it. There's some issues with licorice and blood pressure. Most people are too adrenally burned out to handle licorice anyway. So I would start with more of a calming blend like your macas, your ashwagandhas, your holy basil, schizandra, eleutheros, reishi, stuff like that.
Do you prefer these type of herbs in a tincture, like an alcohol-based tincture, or do you like the 10-to-1 powdered extracts? Do you think the powdered versions, if they're strong enough, are decent?
It depends on the source. It depends on the extraction method. Some people do really harsh extraction methods. It depends on whether they're heating up the herbs as well. I mean, so there's a lot of variables that go into a product, but If you've got a professional manufacturer like I'm using, or you're going to someone like Herb Farm, you're going to be pretty good. Now Foods, I mean, they're okay. Then you start running into these random Amazon brands that you've never heard of them before, and they've got all these 5-star reviews where they probably paid people to review them. So it can get real sketchy. So I urge people, try to go for more practitioner grade, more professional grade, or someone like myself who is working actively with clients while using these formulas, as opposed to people that are just product manufacturers, because once again, I think it's better when you've got more in the trenches experience versus somebody who's just selling a big affiliate program, which is basically I don't know, it's not multi-level marketing, but if it's just like an affiliate program based company, I get a bit curious.
Yeah, curious is a good polite way to put it. All right,
Yeah.
that's cool. Is rhodiola part of the Indian Ayurvedic herb system, like
Good,
ashwagandha?
good question. I don't know. I know that the rhodiola, its native habitat is going to be Siberia and Russia, which is why rhodiola
Oh,
can also help you with adapting to cold and hot temperatures. Rhodiola is really great for people that have trouble modulating their temperature, or people that can't do cold, or they can't do hot very well. Rhodiola helps with that. It's one of the properties of it. But it's Siberia, Russia area, so I don't
oh,
know.
interesting. Okay. It just is
Yeah,
such a weird word, you know. I'm like, oh, where's that come from?
I don't know if it's far. I don't know if it grows far enough south where the native Indians would have picked up on it or not.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So let's jump into some of the more like on the smart drug, less herbal spectrum. So something that I just one of the first smart drugs that I discovered was paracetam. And then I've
Yeah.
also used and like I did some aniracetam today because I'm out of paracetam. I've oscillated between the two, but I will tell you, paracetam, you can take so much of that stuff and it's water soluble. This is just my experience. I want to hear yours and what they're actually doing. But I'll tell you what, dude, if I have to do a public speaking, record a podcast, if I have to do any kind of talking on any level, if I take paracetam, I swear to God, my fucking IQ goes up like 20 points. Like, I become so much more articulate, memory recall, word recall. I'll find myself doing things like jumping back to a conversation thread from an hour ago, just like boink and bring it right back. I mean, it's like my mental acuity in that way is undeniably positively affected by paracetam. And paracetam, I'm always a bit vague on, but paracetam, I'll put in like a big jug of water and I'll sip it all day when I teach my classes at School of Style. I'm talking for 9 hours a day, just all day long, and I never miss a beat as long as I'm like chugging that paracetam water. So what's the deal first with racetams?
First, I thought that racetams, including paracetam, I thought they were modulating dopamine, but I looked into some literature, and there's tests. I don't know if there's human studies, but there's rat studies. They're not finding any dopamine activity changing. I thought it was working on the dopamine system, because that's just how it feels when you're taking racetams. That was my guess. So I don't know exactly the mechanism, what it's actually fixing, what it's optimizing. I've got no clue. I just know the stuff works, and I know that when you start going into your more potent racetams, like your aniracetams, your oxiracetam, whew, that stuff gets intense. My first time with oxiracetam, that was actually when I was writing my second book. I had been writing for like 9 hours. My fingers literally felt like they were connected like the matrix to the keyboard. I mean, I had never typed so eloquently and so accurately. I was hardly ever hitting the backspace button. I was just flying. So I had a lot of weird physical benefits too. I personally, I don't push racetams that much. I don't ever recommend or sell them to any of my clients, just because I like the herbs so much better. My gut just tells me, hey, go with herbs. I've typically been able to modulate neurotransmitters and things with a combination of amino acids like DL-phenylalanine or tyrosine, things like that. I've gotten much better results with much less pushback and much less side effects. Now, I'm not saying racetams are bad for you, but for some people, it just pushes them a bit too hard. And I'm typically working, I mean, you got to realize I'm typically working with people 40s, 50s, 60s. They're a little bit more freaked out by the idea of a synthetic substance like a
Yeah.
rastam.
That's what people always. This is the thing, though, dude. And I respect your ethics and your hesitation to give someone something that's not natural. But this pisses me off when I work with clients or friends, and they're like, I go, dude, here, have some paracetam. When you take your test or whatever they're doing, and they're like, is it natural? I'm like, really, dude? Let's go in your refrigerator. Let's have a look at what's natural. How about your medicine cabinet in your bathroom? And
Yeah.
let's look at the Tylenol, and then let's Google Tylenol dangers and see how many studies, that suggest that that's actually a very dangerous drug. So it's like it's like if something helps you, people are super paranoid about it being natural. But if it's just something that's like publicly accepted and you can walk into Rite Aid and find it, then they're like, oh, I don't care. Like it'll have warnings in the commercial, like may cause suicidal depression, may cause you to murder your whole family. It's like in the fine print. It's like you might cut your own penis off in the middle. I mean, it's like the shit that you hear in those things. And then I'm like, oh, maybe, try some paracetam. And there's like no history of anyone ever harming themselves. But yeah, it's not technically natural. I mean, I would,
And you won't.
and
Dude, look, and here's the deal. And you won't harm yourself with any racetams. And any true nootropic for that matter, absolutely. Take as much Noopept as you want. Take as much oxiracetam as you want. Yeah, you're going to have some effects. You might get a terrible headache if you do Noopept because the dosage is like the head of a toothpick. It's about 1,000 times more effective and stronger than paracetam. It's unbelievable. However, for me, the issue is always compliance. And so if I'm working with someone for a period of time, I don't want to give them something that overstimulates them so much. They're like, oh my God, my brain was on fire. Yes, it was good, but it was a bit too much. And then they get scared away from trying anything else. So I always like to baby step my way up. There's nothing wrong with nootropics. There's nothing wrong with the racetam family for that matter. Totally safe. Never going to kill anybody. Way better than the track record of ibuprofen, killing about 19,000 per year, also contributing to intestinal bleeding, leaky gut, maybe contributing to Alzheimer's, dementia. We don't know the full implications of like ibuprofen and stuff that people pop like Skittles. So absolutely, if you told me your brain wasn't working, absolutely racetams could work. But for me, I just like herbs better. It's not that they work better. I just like herbs better. And so I'm once again, I'm biased on what feels best for me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, dude, trust me. I just ordered a big, like, I don't know, it's like a pound of ashwagandha extract. It was one of the companies on Amazon, but I'm like the asshole that emailed them and I was like, what's your extraction method?
Yeah.
Is it radiated? I mean, I know the questions to ask, and unless they're lying, they answered right. So I've been taking tons of that, and I just love the smell of herbs. They all have a unique smell. I remember being a kid and going to San Francisco and going to Chinatown and like walking in those herb markets and stuff. And I always loved the smell and just the look of these weird plants that you don't see at the grocery store. So I'm with you on that. But I'm also I just, due to my background, when I take something, I want to have a feeling. You know what I mean? I'm looking for like, oh shit, that did something, which brings me to your point of like being really listening to the dosage. And this is like a word, warning to the listeners, but I was set to record a podcast recently here at the house because unfortunately you live far away, or we'd be doing this like on Facebook Live, Instagram Live. I have videos, lights, all this stuff. So I have this guy coming over to talk about cannabis, which was exciting. I'd never done a show on that. And I had some Yohimbe HCl, which is like, Yohimbe's like an aphrodisiac for those of you listening. It's good for sex, but it also is good for just giving you energy and stuff. So it was early in the morning, and I was like, I need some energy. I'm really, sleep deprived. So I was like, I'll take a little bit of Yohimbe, and I accidentally like emptied the whole jar of it into my morning smoothie. I was like, oh no, it's kind of expensive. I didn't want to waste it. So it was floating on top because it's like this dry white powder. So I scooped it out and put it back in its little thing. And there was, I thought, a little bit left in there, And like you said, the match head, that's what the size of the dose is on this Yohimbe. The little spoon is literally like half of a match head because it's not the whole circle. So apparently a bunch was left in the smoothie, and I just pounded my smoothie down. Dude, and an hour later, I'm not even exaggerating, I almost went to the ER. I had like the worst, my heart was beating out of my chest. Like I just, was injected with crystal meth or something. I took 2 saunas. I took a cold shower. I took every like calming herb, GABA, every magnesium, everything that would like settle me down. Nothing put a dent in it. And it was the most uncomfortable feeling I've had in literally in 20 years, dude, since I like did
Oh,
too much real drugs on accident, you know? And eventually the guy shows up to record the podcast, and I'm like, you guys, I got to warn you. I am psychotic right now because I overdosed on Yohimbe. And I talked about it in the episode. It actually added, a bit of fun, I think, to the interview. But, dude, you really do with some of this stuff. You really do have to start off, with micro doses and really feel how sensitive you are because I don't know, we're all a snowflake, right? And some of us really are more sensitive to things like that. I think that the dosage I took that day would have like freaked anyone's body out.
yeah.
But you mentioned modafinil, which is personally one of my favorite smart drugs, but I'm super sensitive to it. So like the first time I ever got it, it's like a 200 milligram tablet. And the first time I did half of one, way too much. Way too stimulating. I drove from LA to Shasta in like 6 hours, going 90 the whole time. I was driving like Jason Bourne, and I was like talking to 3 people in the car, literally nonstop the whole time. My friends were like, dude, I think you kind of took too much of whatever that was. You're acting high. I was like, oh shit. So then I went down for a couple years, like I do a quarter here and there, and that's still a little too stimulating. I get a lot done. I'll sit down and answer 500 old emails in an hour. I mean, you really become a machine. But now I take it only on special occasions, and I literally do half of a quarter, I guess an eighth, which is a tiny, tiny little sliver, barely noticeable. And I'll throw that in a smoothie and blend it, and that's like my modafinil for the day. I did that this morning, in fact, and I feel not mentally fatigued, but I feel very comfortable and relaxed at the same time.
You ought to chat with your our mutual local friend Andrew Hill. You ought to chat with him about his modafinil experience.
He hates it.
I did.
I did, dude. I interviewed him about it, and he was like, "That stuff's satanic," But here's the thing. To my point and to your point, we'll get back to a few more. I've also turned a lot of people on to modafinil. I say, listen, start with like the tiniest sliver, and they're like, "No, I can handle it." And they'll take a half or even a whole one. They're like, I didn't really feel anything. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't even notice it. I'm like, what? It really, really just depends on someone's biochemistry and what's going on in your brain, with some of this stuff. So I agree that you should exercise caution and definitely start with the herbs, but there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. So what about acetylcholine?
I've not used it. I only researched about it. I read about it. I'm not even confident to speak much about acetylcholine because I had only done research for the book on it because it was a requested nootropic that I cover. I know that a lot of people can be acetylcholine dominant or they can be choline dominant, for example. So if you're taking something like acetylcholine or you're taking something like an alpha GPC, you can get a bit of jaw tension and just not generally feel well. Like myself, I'm choline dominant. Dave Asprey, I chatted with him. He said he's choline dominant. So if you're pushing anything with the word choline in your body, including acetyl or the alpha GPC, you may get that tension. That's about all I could say about that one.
Right. And don't you get tons of that from just eating like good, healthy egg yolks too? Is that the same?
You could. Yeah, you're going to get choline, but I mean, then you run into the question of, well, how's someone's gut health? How much choline is really in there? How did you cook the egg? What temperature did you cook the egg? Did you modify the choline because you did your eggs scrambled? You cooked them too high? So I just think I like the idea of food as medicine, but if your goal is to modify brain chemistry, don't say I'm going to eat 5 extra shiitake mushrooms to get XYZ. Just go for the nutrient that's been formulated for that purpose.
Right. And what's your current view on coffee and caffeine? I think last time we talked, you're like, I'm not a huge fan of it, just for brain health.
Well, there's benefits. There's definitely some antioxidants and cool stuff with coffee. I think it's crazy that there's companies that can be massive in selling coffee, but they're not organic or biodynamic, and there could potentially be pesticide issues. So that's what I always worry about. I run a chemical test on people called a GPL tox, and there's also a glyphosate panel you can run through Great Plains. And I'm seeing people who drink coffee a lot, especially non-organic coffees, they've got massive levels of glyphosate, even though they say their diet's organic. So I'm assuming it has to come from the coffee. So just due to the mitochondrial damage that happens from glyphosate, I would say if it's not organic coffee, probably stay away from it. I'm a huge fan of mixing coffee if people want to do it with theanine. just to have that kind of benefit where theanines and amino acids for people found in green tea, you're going to be able to supplement with about 1 or 200 milligrams of coffee. You'll feel pretty darn good. Cold brew coffee's gotten really popular. Cold brew is going to be a bit stronger just because of the way that they make it. So you're going to get much, much more caffeine. So if you're somebody like me who's a super slow metabolizer of caffeine, if you were to touch cold brew, it may be a bit too much. So you better have some theanine on hand or some lemon balm or something. People may say I'm biased once again because I don't do coffee. I don't feel well with it because I'm super slow metabolizer of caffeine. So the only caffeine I do is in matcha green tea. But does it have benefits? Yeah, sure thing. I mean, I saw something the other day where there was a cool correlation study between coffee consumption and optimism. Like that people were more optimistic who drank coffee. My wife, when she drinks it, like today, she went out and she came back home and she was just talking and she was just smiling. I said, "Did you drink coffee between the last time I saw you?" She goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." So she loves it and she drinks it almost daily, where I drink it never. So
yeah, I think it is. It goes back to that thing that everyone's chemistry is different. You know, I got tested and I metabolize caffeine fast. But I've always felt like I'm super sensitive to caffeine because if I do a cold brew or something, like I'm losing my shit. I'm way too hyper.
yeah.
So I usually do like half decaf beans and half regular beans. I don't like to get crazy out there with caffeine, but it's just weird. I have friends, like 2 good friends that just can't tolerate it at all. They just can't do it. They gives them so much anxiety. And then I have other friends, they drink it all day long. They feel amazing. They can take a nap. Like they're fine. So
yeah. And also I think it depends on other factors too. If I look at your adrenal profile, most people when they're stressed, they think they've got high cortisol, but they've typically got low free cortisol. If you've just got a super low cortisol rhythm, and I see that all of a sudden between morning and noon you have this massive spike, and I say, "What did you do? Did you do CrossFit?" "No, I just drank coffee." A lot of people see we modulate. All of us do this. We do this with drugs. We do it with sex. We do it with porn. We do it with Netflix, Instagram, Facebook, Amazon. We modify our neurotransmitters all the time. So buying things helps us with dopamine. Porn can help us with GABA, serotonin possibly. I mean, you've got all different types of things that we're doing to modify our brain chemistry. But if I notice that someone says, "I don't feel quite right until I do my CrossFit," or "I don't feel quite right until I have my coffee," that makes me think, okay, you're probably depleted. You're artificially boosting yourself up with high intensity exercise, which is really whipping the adrenals to secrete adrenaline, noradrenaline. That puts you back into the normal range of cortisol. Therefore, you feel so good, or you feel normal after you exercise, or you feel normal after you do coffee. That tells me there's something off, and you're modulating your lifestyle via coffee, via exercise, self-abuse, whatever, binging, purging, same thing, to artificially elevate neurotransmitters. So if you're doing that, I think it's a problem, but otherwise I'd say go for it. And if you've got a fat source that you like to use with your coffee that's going to give you that slow digest, cool. Maybe it's less impactful on the sympathetic nervous system, but ultimately if you wanted to get geeky and see how is coffee affecting me personally, I don't drink it, so I don't do this test, but you could always hook up a heart rate variability device, measure your heart rate variability score, and if you drink it and you see that your score goes down, well, now you're in a state of sympathetic dominance, which is not good because you can't rest, digest, and restore your body if you're in sympathetic fight or flight from coffee. So measure it, see what happens.
Cool. I like that. Yeah. Measure, then decide. I want to ask next something you alluded to earlier, and I get a lot of questions about this, and it's something I'm definitely not proficient in, and that's the ketogenic diet. For someone who's heard that buzzword, ketosis, ketones, what is that, just in a very basic framework?
So ketones are what we produce naturally, and our species probably arguably only survived with the ability for us to produce ketones. There were times of feast and famine. When we're doing a ketogenic diet, we're basically replicating feast and famine because seasonally in New York in January, there's no pineapple. There's not much growing in terms of vegetables when there's a foot of snow on the ground. So a vegan, vegetarian diet, completely impossible by ancient standards. If you're living in the Arctic or you're living in Minnesota in January, there's nothing growing when it's covered in feet of snow. So all you would have been left with would have been animals, which would have been one of the 60 million bison that roamed the U.S. It would have been elk. it would have been deer, bobcat, whatever your fancy. You would have been primarily on a fat-based, animal product-based diet during the winter. And then spring comes around, you start to get your berries. You've got your wild strawberries, you've got your wild blueberries. So you start to get more sugar, you start to get a little bit more glucose in the diet. And then you get into summer, you get into fall, then you've got carbohydrates. So then you've got potatoes coming in. Any gardener or farmer can help you to track a ketogenic diet down, what's in season. If you follow a seasonal diet, you're probably, depending on where you live, if you live in the tropics, you'll probably never be in a seasonal ketogenic diet if you're eating bananas and pineapple, etc. But if you're living in, let's just say, like I said, up north or even in Kentucky here, if you were following the food of the land, if you were only foraging what's out there, you're going to be in a ketogenic diet probably in the winter or in the early end of spring before the berries come in. You're probably going to be just subsisting on meats and veggies unless you had potatoes or some other sort of like starchy tuber stashed away in a cellar or something. But the idea is that we can fuel our bodies much more effectively and efficiently by using ketones. Now, there's a lot of companies, just like the blue blocking glasses that have gotten trendy, so have exogenous ketones. Now, do those have a benefit? It's debatable. Very scarce amount of research on exogenous ketones. There's tons of research on ketogenic diets and epilepsy, which is the main reason for it. There's a lot of therapeutic value of it. But if I could make my own ketones for free, why buy them? You can make them. Your body can make them. It's free. You can make your ketones. Just like Mercola, when I chatted with him, he said he hadn't orally supplemented with vitamin D in 7 years. And he had kept his vitamin D up. So he doesn't buy vitamin D supplements because he gets it from the sun. So I'm a huge fan of a ketogenic diet, a very cyclical ketogenic diet too, because I've seen people who follow it for too long and they destroy themselves. They'll start to even get nosebleeds in some cases because they've just lost any amount of glucose, any amount of starch. They've depleted the stored glycogen. They've depleted their liver. They've depleted their muscle tissue. Any stored reserve of glucose, they've depleted it. So they start to get you can't manufacture mucus, your mucous membranes. And so when your nose gets super dry, you get a nosebleed. And I've seen that at the far end of somebody doing super, super low carb ketogenic diet for too long. I'm a huge fan of just a day or two a week of kind of a refeed, which is just a fancy word for eating carbohydrates. And that could be a baked sweet potato. Even just a half of a baked sweet potato may be all you need, or a full baked sweet potato a couple times a week. If you're doing butter, cool. Put some butter on there. Put some cinnamon on there to help regulate blood sugar. I follow a ketogenic diet most of the time, but I don't call it a ketogenic diet. I don't promote it. I don't market myself as a ketogenic diet expert. I just happen to wake up and eat pastured meats and maybe a tiny handful of some blueberries and maybe a handful of macadamias. I'm probably in ketosis, and you can detect it. You can buy meters and such. But to me, I think once again, that gets into the conversation you and I have had before, which is the whole orthorexia thing, where now, I've got to measure my blood for ketones or measure my breath for ketones. It's like, unless you're just a geek and you've got nothing better to do, sure, go measure your blood for ketones. But I just go off my breath. Your breath gets a little bit fruity, you know that you're probably producing some ketones. And so this is the way the humans have existed, in a ketotic state mildly for most of the time. And then there were times of feast where carbohydrates came in, or they came in season, and then you weren't in ketosis, and maybe you had 300 or 400 grams of carbs in a day, and then you feel amazing, and then you go back to ketosis again.
Yeah, I like the balanced approach. When I first started drinking bulletproof coffee, I just stopped craving sugar and carbs, and I lost like 15 pounds in a couple months without doing anything except just drinking a really fatty coffee every morning. And then I found out about ketosis and was like, oh, I guess I'm in ketosis. This is awesome, because I had so much energy and I didn't have those like energy dips at 4 p.m. where I wanted to fall asleep. And it was amazing. But what happened is my sleep started to get really jacked up, because I was like, something, I don't even know how it works, but hormonally, like I was changing, and I would wake up with like a cortisol explosion at 3 a.m. or something. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Eventually I traced it back to like, I needed to, as you say, refeed and like be more cyclical about the ketosis. And then I, was measuring it for a while. And now I think I'm where you are. It's just like, I don't know. I just typically avoid a lot of foods that have a lot of carbs anyway, just because I don't eat a lot of that stuff. and I do a lot of healthy meats and fats and things like that. But I'm sure I'm probably in ketosis some of the time, but like I don't really I don't have time to sit there and check either. But I get
Yep.
a lot of questions about this. So I'm like, I don't know enough about it to speak on it. One question I had the other day that maybe you have some input on was from a female, and she said that she's doing a ketogenic diet and she's like, she used to be super thin and she wants to be very thin and lean. And she said she's kind of, she's not overweight. She described it as like, I don't know, she had still a little cushion for the push-in or something like that. She had like a cute way of saying like she's still a little bit more plump than she'd like to be. And she's just super frustrated by that. She wants to be like really lean and ripped and in ketosis, and she finds she can't do that. Do you have any reason why that might be happening?
Well, I'd have to know, why can't she do that? What happens when she does do that? Do you know?
Well, she just said that she just is like, how did she say it? She's just like, he didn't say chunky, but she just said when she's on a ketogenic diet, she can't be lean, basically. Like she just is still a little bit, you know, robust.
Huh.
So I don't know.
So if I'm hearing it right, if she's saying that she went to a ketogenic approach, but she's still holding on to fat, once again, all of the things that humans have evolved to keep us alive, to keep the species alive, those same things can still get turned on. She's probably got a potential thyroid reverse T3 problem. So when you're looking at a full thyroid panel, unless you ask your doctor or your endocrinologist to run it, they're not going to run a full thyroid panel. You've really got to run your free T3, your total T3, your T4, but you've also got to run your reverse T3, which I'll chat about what could be going on with her. But then you've also got to run your TPO and your TG antibodies. If you just run one or the other antibodies, you don't have a full picture. So every client I do blood on, I'll run TPO, which stands for thyroid paradoxase antibodies, and then TG, which is thyroid globulin antibodies. Now, these two different antibodies can indicate autoimmune thyroid disease, which could be Graves' disease or it could be Hashimoto's. 90% of people, so people listening, I guarantee everyone listening knows someone that's been diagnosed hypothyroidism and they're taking thyroid drugs, whether it's Synthroid, levothyroxine, Cytomel, etc. Guarantee they're taking thyroid drugs. Someone knows somebody listening. Now, if she's got TPO or TG antibodies and she's under this autoimmune attack, you've got to get those antibodies down, because no amount of ketogenic diet, no amount of biohacks are going to help you with your weight if you can't get the numbers down. So you've got to get your TPO, TG antibodies run, and then also back to reverse T3. What happens is the body's smart. I mean, the body doesn't want us to die, even though we want ourselves to die sometimes and we just want to give up on life. Your body doesn't. Your body wants to keep you alive. And so what happens is when you go ketogenic sometimes is that people create a reverse T3 problem. Reverse T3 is basically a blank bullet. So you've got your revolver here. You've got 5 potential bullets in the chamber. 3 of those bullets are your active T3 hormone. And then 2 of those bullets are reverse T3, so it's a blank bullet. So you pull the trigger, you're trying to shoot somebody. Oops, that was a blank bullet. That's your reverse T3. It's an inactive hormone, therefore it doesn't activate the metabolism. So if you get reverse T3 measured and you see any levels above 5 or above 10 on your reverse T3, which we could test for her, we could get her tested and figure out what's going on. If she's got that reverse T3 problem, it could be due to stress. So if she tried to go cold turkey and go ketogenic too hard, too fast, if she's got emotional stress, if she's got a hard job, she's got a lot of stress at work, she's got relationship problems, she's got parasites or other type of gut infections like bacteria or yeast, which I find in about 9 out of every 10 people. If she's got that stuff going on, that will also drive up reverse T3. And once again, that's a blank bullet. Remember, so when your thyroid is uptaking hormone, it's uptaking the reverse T3. So you've got this receptor site and it's a blank. So the thyroid's like trying to go, but it's a dead spark plug. You're not creating the spark, therefore the metabolic fire is not engaged. So to fix it, you've got to make sure TPO antibodies are non-existent. You've got to make sure TG antibodies are non-existent. You've got to make sure TSH, which is in between 1 and 2 units, you got to make sure that's dialed in. And then you've got to make sure reverse T3 is below about a 5. If all that is taken care of, I guarantee she'll be able to lose weight no problem.
Cool, man. That's really good stuff. So basically, it has to do with hormones and really doing your panels, your blood work, and all of that stuff, and figure out what's going on in a very thorough way, and more thorough than your average doctor is going to order for you in terms of like labs.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've got clients in Canada, which I've not been able to get the lab I use to run blood in Canada. I had a woman tell me that she went to her doctor over there. It's free healthcare, yay! But they won't run anything. They will only run your antibodies, which are very important. Everyone should have them run once a year. They won't run those for you unless you've got a massive TSH problem. But TSH is just a generic marker that doesn't tell us much. And so, unfortunately, unless you've got a massive, massive thyroid issue, they won't even grant you the access to run these other antibodies. But here in the States or elsewhere listening, if you've got a functional medicine practitioner like myself or someone else that can run these markers, just request it. Just say, hey, full thyroid panel, please. And make sure you get your actual labs. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say the nurse called or the doctor called or the endocrinologist called and said, I'm fine. My thyroid looks fine. Fine is, that's very, I'm sure you could give me a better word, Luke, but it's a very non-specific term. There's a functional range, there's an optimal range, and then there's the conventional range. The functional range is where we want you to be. So a TSH between 1 and 2 is going to be optimal. You may get your TSH back and it says 3.5. Your doctor says, it's a little bit high. You're a little bit hypothyroid, but you're going to be okay. You want the functional range and you want the number. So make sure you request your labs and you actually get your numbers, not someone else's interpretation of your numbers.
Cool. That's really good stuff.
You see how much more I like get fired up when we start talking about this as opposed to herbs? I'm finding myself less interested in I'm finding myself more interested in the functional medicine piece and less interested in like the nootropics and the all of that stuff, because I feel like I've just tapped it out for so long that now I'm like, blood work. Yes, give me the numbers, because I personally got sick of dealing with health that was average. Like, I feel okay, my guts feels okay. Oh, that food kind of tore me up. Oh, I had a bout of diarrhea. What the hell was that? Like, I got so sick of that now I don't even speak with someone about their health unless I've got clinical labs, stool testing, adrenal testing, hormone testing, thyroid labs, antibodies, looking for viruses, looking for Lyme disease, looking for co-infections. And I've taken tons and tons and tons of hours to learn how to apply things and create protocols based on that stuff. But without that info anymore, you're just guessing and checking. And the problem is, everybody can say, I heard about this product on a podcast or this blog post or this YouTuber posted about it. But it's like, there's a million things that might help you and can't hurt you, but we've all got supplement graveyards, and I'm sick of having a supplement graveyard. So
that's funny, dude. I have one of those. I have a special cabinet for like the stuff that cost money, but it didn't really resonate, but I still don't want to throw it away. Dude, Vitalis.
You're still holding on to it. You've got it stashed away. It's like maybe there's one time where a nuclear disaster happens and I'm going to bring out this nascent iodine or whatever, right? I mean, So most people, they typically come to me with like 20 to 30 to 40 supplements they're taking, and I typically whittle it down to about 5 to 7.
Yeah.
But it's based on labs, not, it might help, can't hurt you.
I agree, dude. That's great, because for the amount of money that people like us have spent on things that, are great, but they aren't necessarily the needle moving things like ashwagandha, even stuff we've talked about, great. But if someone's thyroid is trashed, or you're having these like systemic issues and infections and all this stuff, then you're just like, you're putting lipstick on a pig, so to speak, in terms of your health, because you're not targeting the treatments and the supplementation. You're just kind of, this shit's really good for you. Take a bunch of this. It's like, that may not solve the problem. So I really, I love that approach, and I'm glad you're getting there with your practice too. It makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, like turmeric, resveratrol, fish oil. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. But, honestly, you've got to see what's going on. If you've got parasite infections that are stealing your nutrients, I don't care how much turmeric you're using, it's not going to help fix your joint pain. If you've got Mycoplasma pneumonia, which is a species that can affect the joints. So if you've got something like that attacking you, you've got to treat that. You can't just go take turmeric and fish oil and cross your fingers and a high-quality probiotic because it's good for the microbiome. In some cases, you can take a probiotic and you can actually make a problem worse. I've had people take probiotics and they flare up. They have more digestive complaints, because when you get to a high level of bacterial overgrowth, which is generically called SIBO, when you get to a high level of bacterial overgrowth, sometimes you can't just throw a probiotic on it, because it's like throwing the gas on the fire. Sometimes you've got to completely hit the reset button first, use the antimicrobial protocol, get rid of the infections first, and then you come in with the probiotic later. You seed and feed later, but sometimes if you try to just come in and take a probiotic off the shelf because you heard it's good for you, you could be making the situation worse. That's why I say spend a couple $100, get yourself tested, get a good DNA PCR based stool test, figure out what's going on. I've had everything I deal with, I've had it. I've had parasites, I've had yeast, I've had bacteria. I've never gone out of the country. So I mean, 1 out of every 3 has parasites. I've tested about 1,200 people, and counting. 1 in 3 has parasites. 2 in 3 has bacterial infections, which can cause autoimmune disease. So if you've ever been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, autoimmune thyroid disease, you've probably got Citrobacter Klebsiella. These bacteria cause autoimmune disease. And then 2.5 out of every 3 has a yeast overgrowth, a candida overgrowth, which you can measure with a urine test called organic acids. And so fix those big needle movers, and you're going to...
You said earlier that if you do have candida overgrowth, that kombucha makes that worse?
Well, in some cases, because I had a lady who was drinking 5 bottles of kombucha per day. I ran an organic acids panel. Well, who knows? If she's drinking the alcohol version, the one that the GTs makes, probably a buzz. But I measured her with a urine test called organic acids. It measures 2 gases called tartaric acid and arabinose, which is the byproduct of candida in the gut. It's kind of like measuring a tailpipe for emissions, measured through the urine. And she was off the charts. It was one of the highest levels of yeast overgrowth I had ever seen. And I dove into her diet a bit with her, and she said, I drink about 5 kombuchas a day. I said, good Lord, you're at a point where too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Let's stop the kombucha. And we had to get the kombucha out of her diet for quite some time. About 6 to 8 weeks is the typical length of protocols I'll create. And then we started bringing in some herbs, some garlic, oregano, several other different herbs that I use for yeast, and got rid of it. And then she was able to add it back in. But man, I'll tell you, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
All right, cool. Last thing I wanted to cover with you was leaky gut. And I know that, that in itself is a 5-hour podcast, but just... it's something that people are hearing a lot about, and I'm sure some people listening don't really know what that is. So what is this, not that it's a recent phenomenon, but it's something that's really being, even in the mainstream health world now being looked at. What is leaky gut, and what are some, basic protocol that you use with people to help treat that and get rid of it? Sure.
So it sounds like we maybe should have done 2 podcast episodes, because these are like such a dual topic here. But leaky gut, I guarantee. Well, I hate numbers when I throw them to a big audience, so I'll try to refrain. But I would say 80 to 90% of people listening probably have some element of leaky gut going on, which is intestinal permeability. And reason being, many reasons. Electromagnetic fields, so microwave radiation coming from cell phone towers, Wi-Fi, dirty electricity. There's the EMF component that affects the permeation of the gut barrier. You've got something called tight junctions. It's kind of like interlacing your fingers. And food, toxins, EMF, etc., can pull these tight junctions apart. Gluten is one of the most common damagers of the gut lining. When you pull apart those tight junctions, you've now opened your bloodstream up. So now these larger undigested food particles can get into the bloodstream, therefore triggering things like autoimmune disease. And so leaky gut's just the generic term. Technically, it's intestinal permeability if you want to search the literature for it. But gluten, dairy, peanuts, a lot of these allergenic foods can be triggers of leaky gut, therefore pulling this thing apart. Now, there's a lot of people out there that sell leaky gut supplements. I've seen leaky gut programs, online courses, and it kind of bothers me because a lot of these people, for one, they're not practitioners, so they've not done the dirty trench work. But 2, it's not going to work. And then somebody has to come in and clean up the mess of this attempt to heal up leaky gut. And why people fail and why these courses and books and stuff suck is because they're not addressing the root cause first. So, for example, glutamine. I'm sure everyone's heard of L-glutamine. It's great. Glutamine can help to heal up the gut. You've got slippery elm. You've got marshmallow root. You've got chamomile flower. You've got okra extract. You've got zinc carnosine. You got all sorts of different herbs and nutrients that can help heal a leaky gut. However, why come in and try to heal up the gut lining if you haven't removed the thing that's causing the issue in the first place, which could be Citrobacter, Klebsiella, Proteus, Blastocystis hominis, which is a parasite, Dentamoeba fragilis, Giardia. You've got all these different pathogens that can cause the gut, even Candida. I used to think Candida was just like a buzzword for, like nutrition bloggers. Candida. I thought it was just like this hot little trendy topic, but I've realized it can cause systemic issues. I mean, it can cause brain fog. It can cause fatigue, sugar cravings, anxiety, depression. I've healed people from depression just by fixing yeast. I thought, what? Yeast, depression? Like, are you serious? But if you go take all these leaky gut fixes, but you haven't addressed what's causing it, you're wasting your money. And so any approach to heal leaky gut should involve first stool testing to identify what you're up against in terms of yeast, bacteria, fungus. I see a fungus a lot called geotrichum. So if anybody's got any fungus on their fingernails or their toenails, any amount, even just a tiny tip in the corner, if it's manifesting on the outside, it's on the inside. You've got to test for it. But I see a lot of fungal infections in the gut, and you can treat those. You've just got to measure them, and then your protocol is going to be based on what you're up against. So if it's like fungus plus bacteria plus yeast plus a parasite, you've got like 4 or 5 infections, which is very, very common. I'm going to have to use a heavy hitting protocol. And then once that's taken care of, you get your gut retested. You make sure that all the infections that could cause leaky gut's gone. You make sure that the diet's super clean. There's no grains. In most cases, it's an autoimmune paleo diet that I'm recommending. Lots of bone broth, collagen, peptides, hydrolyzed collagen, etc. A lot of these healing foods. Then we bring in the leaky gut supplements, and then we restore the lining to the gut. H. pylori, that's another big one we didn't mention. H. pylori is a bacterial infection that can cause ulcers and stomach cancer. You've got to remove that too. H. pylori is a big leaky gut cause, and you've got to treat that. Conventional doctors will put you on triple therapy, now called quadruple therapy, which is 3 or 4 antibiotics at the same time. It doesn't work. H. pylori is a bacterial species. It's millions of years older than us. It's evolved. It's an antibiotic-resistant bug now. You have to use herbs to successfully treat H. pylori. I've seen it. I've seen people come to me after going to the fancy gastroenterologist. They paid $5,000 to go to this specialist with 20 letters after his name. I test them. They still got the infection even after using rounds and rounds of antibiotics. So herbs must come into play, and you must eradicate H. pylori if you want to successfully heal a leaky gut.
Dude, awesome. There's a lot in it. That was actually a very great, thorough explanation of something that's highly complicated. So thank you for that. That's awesome. Yeah, I was talking I think it's on my mind. I met a guy yesterday who had IBS and Crohn's disease really bad, where he was just like down for the count, and he got into fecal transplants and actually met a donor and did like a full, 3-month program of fecal transplants and healed his gut and the whole thing that way. So I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stuff kind of going on with this. It gets really interesting. But he said the same thing as like those infections and parasites and all this weird stuff going on is actually the root cause, not necessarily that you're eating, sourdough bread or something. It gets much deeper. So it's a complex issue, but
fecal transplants work. I would reserve it for a last ditch effort. Like if I had an autoimmune disease like Crohn's, I would probably do it. The only reason I say it's a last ditch effort is because you get personality changes as well.
You start turning into the donor.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah, there's some interesting stories out there about fecal transplant recipients who started to love jazz music and love French fries and all sorts of things. I get goosebumps, and then they chat with the donor, and the donor's like, oh yeah, I love French fries. I love jazz music. And they pick up their personality traits as well. So people are starting to have I've had several reports of people saying that they've got fecal transplants, and then they started to develop bipolar disorder, and they found out the donor was bipolar as well. So for me, you've really got to do a good job. Just like I wouldn't let any mom just randomly give my daughter her breast milk, especially if she's taking pharmaceutical drugs like antidepressants, because those drugs go into the breast milk. Same thing with the stool. You've got to really get a good a good thorough intake of the mental
Yeah.
health of the fecal transplant donor first, because you're going to modify your brain chemistry.
That's interesting. Yeah, it took my friend Jordan about a year to find a suitable donor, and he had to run all sorts of labs. I think he ran $4,000 worth of labs on the guy that finally became his donor. He'd never been on antibiotics, no mental illness, all that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, and he found a. I mean, it's crazy that he found a donor, and then he went through the whole thing. It's an America's story. I'm gonna have him on the show at some point, but I'm gonna text him and be like, dude, did you start liking jazz music, or did you like become randomly bisexual, or like have any like big life changes after the transplant period? And do they match that of the donor? Really interesting stuff, man. That is a
I
trip.
know.
That's a
I
trip.
know.
All right. Well, we've been on forever. I appreciate your time. This is obviously going to be a double episode, like I love to do, because there's just so much stuff I can't stop. I still have a list of like 10 topics, so we'll do another one.
Well, if you got any rapid fire, let's hit those, and then my brain will probably be toast here.
All right. Let me see. What's the best test for heavy metals, hair or urine?
I use a combination.
Okay.
So you can use urine. I'm not a huge fan of chelation, so like the DMSA and all of that to really push heavy metals, because most people I'm working with are so sick that the act of chelation to measure heavy metals typically makes them sick. If you're just super healthy and you think, oh, I've got heavy metals, sure, maybe you could try chelation. But for me, some people, it makes them too sick. And I've had people do the DMSA or the DMSO, these different chelation methods to measure urine heavy metals.
I recently did that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've had people that are bedridden for a week after doing that testing. So I'm a huge fan of doing blood for metals. That's actually my preferred method, is blood metals. And Quicksilver Scientific out of Colorado, they've got a really good heavy metals blood test. And then if you show up with something high like mercury, you can do something called a tri-test, which is a combination of hair, urine, and blood. So you can really dive apart whether it's methyl, mercury, or the other types of mercury. And then you kind of judge your toxicity based on that.
Interesting. And what about getting them out? For myself, for example, I have crazy high lead, and it's just like, I don't know.
I'll send you a couple email recommendations,
Okay.
but I would be doing a modified citrus pectin every day. Citrus pectin's great. I'd be taking probably about 5 grams of citrus pectin per day for you. And then also there's some cool things with like phase 2 liver detox that I'll send you. I'll send you a couple good recommendations. Amino acids are great. You can really do a lot of good work with amino acids for metals. So I'll send you a couple recommendations, but modified citrus pectin is going to be a game changer.
Cool. Awesome, man. Thanks for the tip. Well, I think that about wraps up the questions, with the exception of my final question. So every time I talk to you, blow my mind. You teach me so many new things, or at least expand on things that I have a slight awareness of. You've taught the audience tons of stuff today. So name 3 teachers or teachings that have been influential in your life. Could be a book, an expert, a guru, anything of that nature.
I think you did this to me last time, and it was really damn hard. Let me try here. Why Stomach Acid is Good for You by Dr. Jonathan Wright. I may have mentioned that last time, so if I did, I apologize. But
That's
look
okay.
up.
I don't remember, but it's fine either way.
All right, so look up the book Why Stomach Acid is Good for You by Dr. Jonathan Wright. It's a great book about how after age 20, you make less and less hydrochloric acid and enzymes every year, and that sets you up to pick up more infections because hydrochloric acid neutralizes bacteria and parasites. So as you get older and you make less and less acid, contrary to popular belief, you're making less acid as you get older, not more acid. When you have super low stomach acid, you get heartburn. So you need more acid, not acid blocking drugs. We'll chat about that on another show. What else do I got on my book pile here? Lights Out by T.S. Wiley. Great book. One of the best books ever. And also Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield, or anything by Stephen Pressfield. Do the Work, The War of Art. He's got a book called Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit. He's got a book called Turning Pro. Stephen Pressfield's great. Basically, he helps you to get out of your own way. Most of the time, it's us. We're the problem in our lives. It's not someone else. It's typically us, and we try to blame it on others. Typically, it's some kind of mental block in our head that's preventing us from achieving the life or being the person that we want to be. So Stephen Pressfield, he's a game changer, and it's completely unrelated to health and wellness, which is probably a refresher for your audience.
Cool. I love it. I mean, I'm really into the personal development stuff, and I've been interviewing some more people in that space, so I love those recommendations. That's awesome. All right, so people are hearing your level of expertise, and you're obviously talking about the clients that you work with. So how can people find your work and work with you if they want to pursue that?
Sure. Yeah. Just Google Evan Brand, or you could just check out the website. It's evanbrand.com now.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And yeah, so they could check out the podcast, and you've been on there. You'll be back on there. I've got about 240 plus episodes.
How many
So
downloads? How
hopefully,
many downloads are you up to now?
so I stopped counting at 7 million.
Oh my God, dude. That's crazy. I'm a year in, I'm at 600,000. I'm like, I gotta hit 1 million by the end of the year.
Oh,
That's
you will.
incredible, dude.
You will, man. You will. So the podcast is there. People could check that out. I've gone much deeper into, kind of the functional medicine approach to things. And then if they want to work with me, they could just schedule on my website. I've got a girl named Megan. She's a nutritional therapist who she does intakes with everybody now. So she'll chat with you for 15 minutes about people's symptoms and their goals and see if you're a good fit. And if you're a good fit for care, happy to take you under my wing, get you some of these labs run, because without the clinical data, you're really just guessing and checking. That's my philosophy, is test, don't guess. I guessed for so long that I got sick of it. So that's when I became a functional medicine practitioner, and this is what I do around the world with people on phone and Skype. So look me up and stalk me, and you'll learn more about me listening to the show.
Awesome, dude. I'm ready to schedule one of those 15-minute calls. I'm like, man, I need to work on this stuff.
I think we were supposed to get you an adrenal test, and then I don't know what happened. I don't know if I dropped the ball or what happened.
Oh, when I texted you my cortisol test, I think.
Yeah.
You're like, that one's like not so good. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay, I'm gonna follow up. Actually, I'm gonna make a note of that.
Yeah, so
Adrenal
I
test.
need to get you taken care of if we've still got some uncovered pieces,
Okay.
especially your gut too. I mean, I think here's the deal with like cortisol and adrenals. A lot of times there's a root in the gut. So yeah, you could go take a bunch of adrenal supplements, but if you've not addressed the gut, that's probably either that or the liver. A lot of times there's issues with like phase 2 liver detox problems, and that could affect the adrenals. So we'll chat and
Awesome,
we'll
man.
have some fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. Always a pleasure, dude. And until next time, you be well and have a great 4th of July.
Too, Luke.
All right, bye. Evan.